All right, Kaz, how's it going?
It is going.
Quite the day, hasn't
It has indeed been quite the day.
We now find ourselves in a city park. We have traveled to 3 different Buddhist temples today to practice, and we've been meditating all day, starting from 7 in the morning, and it's now probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're about to meditate again.
All right, let's go again.
So we would love for you to join with us. We'll probably do about 10 minutes here. I'm actually going to set a timer so that we're spot on with the time.
Perfect.
And after that, Kaz and I are going to talk about what we experienced today, any thoughts we may have on all that, and just go from there. So
we will fill you in on the details.
So for now, we meditate. All right. All right, I'm not sure if you heard the bell, but it went off. It was a little bit quiet. It's nice meditating out here
Indeed.
in, well, somewhat of nature, of course, but also you have a lot of different sounds.
Indeed, you do. I like the water. And I agree there's a bunch of different sounds that you can or cannot pay attention to, depending on how you want to look at that. And
Right? Yeah.
it's definitely a good spot.
Yeah, it's good to find different places to go to, and you're never really going to find a place that's 100% quiet.
Yes.
There's always going to be something going on. Theoretically, I guess you could lock yourself in a padded room, but even then you may hear like noises within your body, right? Like maybe your stomach is digesting food or something like that, and there's always going to be something. So I try to just observe what's going on around me, not let it become a distraction. Use whatever's going on around me as a support for meditation.
Exactly.
Rather than an enemy to my meditation. What do you think about that?
I agree with that. That reminds me of what you talked about with the meditation lesson that you did, where you had a bad tone and the objective was to listen to that while you meditated. And in a sense, perhaps you can elaborate on that, but in my mind, it's to essentially train you and your mind to not be so deterred by things that could be seen as a distraction, whether that's an airplane flying overhead or some noise you found on YouTube or a dog barking down the street. It's, again, to your point, you're never in a complete silence. And even if you are, you still probably have something going on up here. I know I do. So
Exactly.
Training your mind to be okay with those situations and being able to adapt and, like you said, support your meditation and not hinder it.
Exactly.
Very, very important.
Yeah, it is. And that was a great exercise, actually, where, I was going through to elaborate on that a little bit more, I was going through a certain teaching meditation lesson, if you will, with a meditation teacher, and the whole lesson there, or teaching, if you will, was to listen to an unpleasant sound, and to specifically meditate on an unpleasant sound. And it's very helpful to do things like that. I actually, during that practice, found a weed eater to be a support for my meditation, because somebody was outside using one of those. I live in a suburban area, right? So you hear lawnmowers and leaf blowers and things like that. Well, somebody happened to be weed eating next door, and surprisingly enough, after practicing and listening to that for a little bit, it became somewhat pleasant to actually listen to it. I don't know. It sounds weird, but it changed everything.
For sure. Well, I think too, also the way you look at it, not seeing it as a bad or a good thing, it just is there, and learning to cope with that and still be able to get something out of your meditation. Again, I mean, even here, right, the water's going, we hear cars and airplanes, and there's lots of noise and distraction, and we can observe that, but we don't have to attach or let that detract from what we're doing. We can use those things to support and give us something to focus on, or give us something to not focus on, keep our mind clear, observe the sound and let it pass. There's a bunch of different angles you could take to that, but
exactly. No, I love it. And this is really a lesson for life, right?
Indeed.
Because the more you can practice these types of things where, at first your initial reaction may be, I don't want this. It's unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you begin to work with that thing and intentionally practice dealing with that thing, and then transforming that thing into a support for your well-being rather than a distractor or, again, like I was saying, an enemy, you can take that lesson and apply it to life. And,
Indeed, you can.
When you have difficult experiences, which we all face difficult experiences, that's inevitable. You can deal with those a lot better.
Indeed. Difficult experiences are part of the fun of life, right? We all have them. We're all going to go through them at some point if we haven't already. Yeah, and just learning how to deal with those situations. And again, I think the thing that I've taken away from the books we've been reading and the meditation is it's all about how you frame it mentally. This concept of good and bad is malleable, right? You can change it depending on how you look at things. And I guess the point that I'm getting from the lessons that we've talked about together and from your lesson, what I had reached and grabbed out of that is exactly that, right? How do you frame things to not be good or bad, but to use those things to support you through your journey in life? Essentially what you were saying, right? It's taking the bad, or whatever you want to call it, learning to work with those feelings and then find something to support yourself out of that.
Yeah, perception is everything.
Indeed it is.
Excuse me, everything, right? The only thing we can really change is ourselves.
That is very
our own
true.
mind, our own habits, all of that. And it's interesting because when you begin to change internally, then the entire world outside changes as well. And there's something to that. I mean, we could even dig into the philosophy of that, but long story short is, perception is very important.
Indeed. I agree with that. I think that's basically everything. You said it very well. We can't change or control much else outside of ourselves. I mean, life is very limited in that sense where we don't have a lot of control over a lot of the external factors. But what we can control is up here. And if we can learn to do that constructively, my goodness, that does wonders. That keeps me sane.
Same here. Yeah, it's great. So what did you think about the excursions today?
It was a lot of fun. As you mentioned earlier, we visited 3 different temples. And I liked that the first and last one, we got to kind of go and do our own thing. The second one, as you know, we had a service and a meal after that. But I very much enjoyed the day. I think it was great. We got to start off our morning with some meditation at your house. We read our Tao Te Ching book as well.
Yes.
We covered some of that as well. But yeah, it was a great time. I think that each temple had its own thing about it, its own energy or aura or whatever we want to call it. It just felt like a unique experience with each one of them. The second one that we went to was, and I don't want to steal it from you, but it was quite an experience. Perhaps psychedelic, as you might say.
Yes.
But it was a fun time, and just getting to see, we've been talking about Buddhism and going to Buddhist temples, but seeing even the different flavors of that. And in all honesty, there's a lot that I don't know, so getting to see those doors open today was very interesting. I very much enjoyed it. What were your thoughts? Did you have anything that stood out to you in particular? Or?
Yeah, well, and just to provide a little additional context, we planned out today to be a full day of meditation. Of course, there were breaks where we weren't meditating, but we decided to visit 3 different Buddhist temples around our area. And the first one was a Burmese temple. And when we showed up there around 9 o'clock in the morning, nobody was there. Somebody let us in, of course, but no one was actually in the temple room where, you know, they have the statue of the Buddha and everything. So we got to, you know, just meditate on our own in front of this very beautiful marble statue of the Buddha, and then some small marble statues to the side of that big one. And so that first one I really enjoyed because it was just so quiet, you know, and it was, the temple was tucked away and, you know, kind of a more wooded area, right? I mean, it was still in the city, but you kind of had to drive on a couple back roads to get there. So, you know, on that one, I could literally hear a pin drop.
Yes, it was definitely quieter than compared to our environment now.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I think there were some pros to that. And again, just seeing the giant marble statue is beautiful, and having that space to ourselves, showing up, and here are two random people in this temple early in the morning. I mean, that was beautiful.
And no one spoke English. At least anyone we interacted with, they spoke no English.
It was a lot of hand gestures to figure things out and make sure, are we good? And it was a good time. But I mean, I think that's beautiful. And again, the solitude was absolutely there. We talked about having noise and distractions and all of that. And certainly there's still some up here, as we talked about, but as far as the external environment goes, it was very serene, very quiet. I say that as an airplane's passing by overhead, but
right. Definitely a lot of noises out here.
There are some different noises out here, that's for sure. Yeah, it was a beautiful time. I'm glad we got to go to that temple, and I would really like to come back and visit that when we could spend more time there.
Yeah.
Maybe hang out and interact with some of the monks. Because to me, it looked like they had the temple that we were at, and they had several other buildings as well, where I presume people live and operate there.
That's what it looked like. Yeah.
I would be curious to see what the rest of that's like, because that's some side we didn't get to explore. But in all fairness, it was early on a Sunday morning, and we just kind of wandered in. So
right. I definitely want to go back to that one.
Indeed.
I liked the energy of that one.
I agree.
It had a good vibe to it, and it just felt very conducive to meditation. So, but yeah, then the second one was a Tibetan Buddhist temple, where we took place in I don't know what I would call it, a
ceremony of sorts.
Ceremony.
Yes.
Absolutely a ceremony, an offering, a practice, a service, whatever you want to call it. And gosh, I'm trying to remember what it was called. The 21 deities, Zambala deities, something like that.
That sounds right, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, we need to go look that up and get back, come back around with that one. But for any of you out there who may practice, you know, the Tibetan form of Buddhism, you probably know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And the whole service was like prayers to these deities that you know, were of different colors, and they represented different directions. They had different paraphernalia, and you know, the prayers were around prosperity, good health, you know, that there would be, again, on the prosperity thing, wealth and an abundance of crops and things like that. Those types of prayers that you could tell came from maybe a more tribal or nomadic society. So it did feel very ancient in that way.
I would agree with that. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier, that it had a very tribal feel to it.
Yes.
That a lot of the ceremonies did seem like, well, and they did, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but it seemed to me exactly what you said. This was a time when survival was a lot harder than it is now. Crops were very important to survival, and it was, a lot of the prayers just seemed just very tribal, and what the actual interpretation was in English, reading alongside that, it just had a whole different feeling to it compared to like the first temple or even other ones we've been to. And I'll coin what you said earlier. It was psychedelic in a lot of ways.
It was indeed psychedelic. And, you know, it was the wording, right? Because the whole thing was in Tibetan, but there were English translations of what we were chanting below the Tibetan in the book that we were reading and or following and chanting along with. And so that, you know, the different kinds of deities, like I was saying, and the different colors and like the whole experience, you know, also kind of dealing with loss of ego a little bit.
Oh, yes.
Because it was like, hey, everything you know and you're comfortable with, you need to kind of just let go of, because now you're in this alien world and, you know, you just need to face whatever's in front of you. So for me, a lot of it was very akin to the psychedelic experience, which was, you know, a good thing, because I felt some growth come from that.
For sure. Well, and I think you said something very interesting there with it being kind of alien and surrendering your ego, and I felt that a lot too. Even for us who do go out and explore different philosophies and temples and stuff, it still had its own unique vibe to it, where it just felt different, but in a good way. And it was even for us, again, exploring these philosophies, I don't want to say fully prepared, but I think that fits best here for what was in store. And I mean that in the most positive way. It was an amazing experience, but there's nothing to like prepare you for that. And it was very tribal, it was psychedelic, it was beautiful. Even like the idols and things that they had in the room with us in the temple, it was very colorful, it was very bright. Incense were going. There were a lot of people in there. We did the food offerings and all of that, and it was a whole ritual, a whole experience, and I feel like I got a lot out of that. It was just so unique and so different than what we're used to, sitting on a mat in silence, just meditating. Exactly.
Yeah, it was definitely different, you know, with and you brought up a great point of the full sensory experience of the incense, the drumming, the cymbals, the chanting, everything, right? And then even reading, and the visualization, right? As you brought up, the colors.
Yes.
All the walls were covered with icons, and, you know, there were statues everywhere. Everything was bright, vibrant colors. And then what I was going to say was even the reading, right? As you're reading, you know, the stuff that we're chanting, it was, my imagination just kind of ran wild for a minute, you know, of like, it was just so otherworldly.
Indeed it was. I really enjoyed too at the second temple how supportive everybody was. We showed up an hour early before the service started, and that monk just opened the door and he was like, you two get in here.
Yeah.
And he showed us around, he showed us where to go, and, you know, all explained the services. And granted, we had no idea what that would actually entail, but it was a lot of fun getting to hear about that from a real monk. And after that, of course, eating with everybody, and it was just interesting to see the people. It was the coordinator who said it's like the United Nations. It's like a melting pot of everybody. And I truly saw that too, because there were people from different walks of life there. And I had a lot of fun at the lunch afterwards, just talking with people about their experiences and hearing how they fell into this.
Yeah.
It was really cool. I liked that part too.
Me too. Yeah, they were very welcoming.
Yes.
Everybody there was so nice, and yeah, we were offered food afterwards, and the food was delicious. Wonderful vegetarian meal. So yeah, it was great. And then, do you have any other thoughts on the second one?
I just thought it was funny that we were talking about Mount Everest and rock climbing and Sherpas this morning, and then we go there, we're having lunch afterwards, and the person we were talking to is like, yeah, I used to be a Sherpa at Mount Everest. And I was like, that's crazy. We were just small world, right? Small universe.
Yes.
It was just so weird that we were talking about something like that, and then the dots connected an hour or two later. I don't know, maybe that was the universe winking at us in some way, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. There's no
was very
spiritual
interesting.
context to that, maybe, but it was just an interesting observation.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting for sure. We were literally talking about Sherpas and, the mountains over in the Himalayan region. And
Yes.
then we meet a guy there that used to do that. And of course, he's from there too.
Yes.
So pretty neat stuff.
Interesting how all that aligned.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about it on the second temple. The food was great. I had a fun time. I would love to go back. It's probably, realistically for us, a little bit of a drive to go there weekly, but it was absolutely worth it if we can make it out.
Yeah.
Be happy to do that again.
Yeah, and then the third one we went to was a Cambodian temple.
Yes.
Which the architecture reminded me a lot of what I've seen from Thai temples.
Yes.
Very ornate, golden Buddha statues, but also other types of statues like Garuda, who's like a bird, right? Bird god type of thing. He was a part of the architecture. There were stupas, there were a lot of just intricate designs throughout all of the buildings and pieces of the temple and things like that.
I would agree with that. The Cambodian temple, the place that we went to, I would say it was different because it wasn't at least that we saw, traditional temple where you think of likely like a room or a place you go. This was a place with multiple buildings that we walked around and multiple outdoor places to go explore. As you mentioned, a lot of like statues, just very intricate, detailed pieces and scenery, if you will, that was put out there and put together. And that was really interesting just walking through. I remember the statues that were out there that people had donated.
Yeah.
Those giant Buddha statues, and there were just rows of them. And that was so cool to me that that was the thing.
Yeah.
Maybe not somewhere I would go, and maybe I would sit and meditate there, but it was just interesting to see that and just seeing all the, again, ornate little details and how intricate everything got. And you could walk over here and see a really intricate fountain, and then go over here and see statues and stuff that you just wouldn't see elsewhere. And that was the part that I enjoyed, is how vibrant, how detail-oriented, how all of that stuff came in together to make this holistic and spiritual experience. And
Yeah.
I would say we probably spent the least amount of time there, since that was our last stop of the day, but I still enjoyed that thoroughly, of getting just to see that kind of architecture and just be in that kind of environment. Again, going back to what you said earlier, it was alien, it was different, it's not something you see every day. So I feel very honored to have gotten to go there and see what we saw.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like we were in a different country.
It did. I remember we were
perhaps
driving down the
Cambodia,
road,
right?
and we were joking about that, how we kind of went on a little tour,
Yeah.
even here in our own backyard of Texas.
Yeah, definitely. They did a great job of bringing that culture here.
Indeed, they did.
And allowing, people who come to that temple to really experience that culture and get the full, feeling of what you might feel being over there, and like I said, perhaps Cambodia.
Sure.
So yeah, that was cool. And again, like you said, we didn't spend too much time there, but hey, I would go back. I know apparently they have
100%.
really good food they serve there, so
Gotta go for the food sometime.
yeah, gotta do that.
I also just loved, we only talked with that one lady that was there, but she was really nice. Again, I love it when you go to these places and you show up and, we're honest. We don't know what's going on. We didn't call ahead of time. We didn't look at the website really. We just showed up and like, hey, we're here. Can we look around? And I love that out of all the places we go to like this, everybody's always so kind and welcomes us with open arms. And that's, out of all the temples we've been to, it's been like that. And I very much enjoyed that aspect. And I think this is what these philosophies teach, right? Is to be open and compassionate to all people. But it's just good to get those little reminders of opening the door, come on in, go walk the grounds. There's no questions asked. Again, we just showed up and we were like, here we are. We don't know what's going on. We just saw this and wanted to check it out. And they're like, come on in.
Right?
I love that. I think
very
that's
welcoming.
Great. Yes, everybody's very welcoming. And I think it's needed in these kinds of environments. And I'm very thankful that there was no hesitation or awkwardness, because I can understand too, coming from a more Western background, that it might be intimidating to walk into some of these places, especially if you aren't very well versed. And again, I loved that as soon as we got in contact with somebody, the doors were wide open, and it wasn't like, well, who are you kind of a thing. It's like, just come on in and join us. We'll figure everything out. And I very much appreciate that.
Yeah, that was great for sure. Really good experience all around. So, in conclusion of all of that and of the day in general, what would be either one or a few of your takeaways from the day?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I think first and foremost, just spending time with a good friend of mine is a big plus. So. But I would just say getting to see something different. We use the word alien a lot today. And, maybe we tone that back, but just something different in our lives. And the fact that we went out on this Sunday and decided to go try something new, I am using that as one of my takeaways. I think that I don't know too many people who would spend a Sunday doing something like that. So I'm grateful that we did that. We committed to it, made it happen. And then also just the spiritual side of it. Like, we had a whole day to meditate together, spend time in different environments. And, I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that? There's a lot you could take away from that.
Yeah.
It was just a beautiful day.
Yeah, it was indeed, and I would probably say the same thing. It was great to step out of the comfort zone a little bit and try something different.
Yes.
And I think it's important to do that in life. Expand your horizons a little bit, open your mind a little bit, and don't be afraid to get a little bit uncomfortable, because you might uncover something very fascinating that you otherwise would not have uncovered because you wanted to, maintain the status quo or just stay comfortable. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of days where it's great to just be comfortable and, whatever that looks like for you. But I think it's important to practice, doing things that kind of make your skin crawl a little bit, and kind of get you uneasy a little bit, because you're only going to grow from that.
Exactly. I think there's some growth to that. Even again, just walking into an unknown environment and explaining to somebody why you're there and what you want to get out of that, like that alone will help you grow.
Yeah.
Even stripping all the spiritual stuff, out of that. I completely agree with you on that. I think that stepping outside of your comfort zone is key.
Yeah.
That's the key to real growth.
Indeed. And another thing that I would take away is what you brought up earlier about perception.
Yes.
And how perception is everything. And I mean, having the wrong perception going into our experience today could completely, color the day to where it might have been a negative, experience, or maybe we didn't get as much out of it because, maybe we come in with our preconceived notions and we step in and we're like, oh, well, I don't really like this because they don't do things the way that I would like them to do it.
It's very true.
But instead, if you come in with an open mind, and if you're not looking at it so black and white where it's good or bad, but rather you're just observing and taking in the whole thing as it is, just observing the experience as it is, as simple as that, then in my mind, there's really no way to lose at that point.
I fully agree with that. An open heart and a smile on your face, right? Like that sets the whole day up for success. But I agree with you, not walking in with these preconceived notions or ideas of what the day is supposed to look like. And What's that saying? Just going with the flow. That's very much what we did today, and
Yes.
I'm glad we were able to do that. Again, just take it for what it is. There was no preset objective for today. We just wanted to go out and have an experience. We did. It was beautiful, and we'll remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of going with the flow, we're not going to dive into this now because we've already made a long enough video, but we have been reading the Tao Te Ching. It talks a lot about going with the flow, and maybe on a subsequent video sometime in the future, we might talk about this
We could.
some more. I think that'd be a good idea, but
That is very true that that's an ongoing topic in this book. That's,
yeah.
there's a lot of going with the flow and the Tao.
Well, with that said, though, I think that pretty much wraps up this video. And thank you for anyone who has viewed this. And feel free to leave comments. And of course, liking and subscribing is always welcomed, but it's never forced. So yeah, feel free to provide any feedback you may have based off of what you've seen or what we've talked about in this video. And other than that, I think that's about it. You got any closing words?
I just wanted to say thank you for having me. This is my first video with you on this channel, so
Yes.
I'm happy to be here. Again, my name's Kaz, and I hope to see y'all again too one day. You guys take care.
Absolutely.